Hi! Hey guys, what's up? My name is Dom. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new to my channel, I typically make bookish content, movie content, and anything else in between because I like to do whatever I want on this channel. Today's going to be movie content. I'm not going to be reacting to anything. Instead, I want to do like a movie wrap-up. I want to talk about all the movies I've seen in 2021 so far. This video is going out much later than I wanted it to. I wanted this to be out like the first weekend of April. Here we are. As of now, I am filming this on April 13th. So when is this video going to come out? Who knows? Is it April 13th? It is April 13th. So who knows when this video is actually going to come out. But because it's coming out later, I just want to establish the fact all the movies I'm going to be talking about in this are from January to March because I'm thinking I'm going to do like quarterly wrap-ups for movies. Originally, I had no intention of doing movie wrap-ups on my channel, but then last year I tier ranked all the movies I watched and there was 120 plus movies. And I had so little time to actually talk about them, I couldn't really go into depth with them. So I figured I'd do some wrap-ups here and there just so you guys have like a better idea of these movies and I don't have to do like a one-sentence summary come the end of the year for the tier rankings. So let's begin. Alright, so the first movie I watched this year is American Murder, The Family Next Door, which is actually a documentary. So a few years back, a woman called the police and said she hadn't heard from her neighbor in a while. Her neighbor was missing. The police went to investigate. Sure enough, the woman was gone along with her two daughters. They were questioning the husband. The husband's like, oh no, I don't know where she went. I'm worried. Everyone was suspicious. Blah, blah, blah. Turns out the husband murdered his wife and two daughters. So this is a documentary about the whole thing, about like when it started to like the final reports and what we see in the news today. Except for this documentary, this was all found footage. So it was actual voice recordings from people's phones. We got to see actual text messages. We saw the wife's actual Facebook post. There was really no voiceovers to give the story to us. It was shown to us rather than told, because usually documentaries tell the story while showing, but this was purely shown to us. I gave this 3.5 stars, and just because I don't really know how to rate a documentary. I know some people thought the found footage was a little off-putting, but I had no problem with the way they were told. The story is incredibly sad. I remember seeing this on the news when it was first initially reported, when it was all happening, and it was just a moving documentary. The husband really pissed me off, because you go into the documentary knowing he did it. So when you see all the excuses he gave the police or all like the lies he told them to get the blame away from himself was anger inducing. And it was really funny because like, or not funny, but like it was really, what's the word I'm looking for? It was interesting because one of the neighbors knew from the beginning. He suspected that man from the very moment he stepped foot into the door for investigation. The whole situation is just really sad and it just pisses me off because to this day I'm still seeing articles about this family. And like, I want to see his mugshot. It disturbs me that whenever an article's going around about this case, you see a picture of him smiling with his wife and children. And it's like, he literally murdered them. I want to see his mugshot, you know? You get the vibe I'm trying to put off here? Like, why are you going to show off this monster with his family when he murdered them? That's really all I have to say about it. It was very intriguing, and I got this from, I watched this on Netflix. I think it's a Netflix original documentary, so anyone around the world should be able to see it if they so choose. So the next movie I watched was a rewatch, and it's Anastasia. This was the first time I watched it, and I don't know how long. I want to say even before high school. And this is the very, very fictionalized tale of Princess Anastasia from Russia. And when I say very fictionalized, I mean they brought in a magic system and a lot. It's not really like minus the magic system, of course. It's not really historically accurate. Like the main villain is Rasputin, but if you actually like read history, he was essentially an ally to them. I know a lot of people complain about Anastasia being alive because everyone's like, well, now we know she's dead. And it's like, okay, but this movie came out before that discovery was made, so you can't really fault them for that. But what happened with this movie is that I was actually watching it with the kids I babysit last year. Like, I started it in December, and then someone in my household texted me that they were tested positive, so there's this whole like shebang where the mom was freaking out. We had to like rush home. She had to rush home so then I could rush home and, you know, get away from proximity of her children. And I was halfway through the movie when I got a text message from said person like, hey, I'm positive, and then I just never continued the movie. So I started all over again in January, watched it till the end, and now it's a rewatch, and that's all I have to say about it. It's on Disney+. That's what made me really excited for it. The next movie was another rewatch. It was Cinderella. Why I wanted to rewatch this, I don't know. I was with the kids I was babysitting, and suddenly I was like, let's watch a movie. and I just put on Cinderella. And it's as good as I remember. This is a solid like 4 to 5 star movie. It's one of Disney's early days. She's the second ever Disney princess. So moving on to another rewatch, which I watched the same day. It was Cinderella II. Now, this is one I have not seen since like elementary school, so I went into this as a blank slate almost. I totally forgot this was technically technically an anthology. A lot of people seem to hate this when I was going through Letterboxd. Like, people pretend it didn't happen. I didn't mind it. I thought the music was really catchy. I did like the story when Cinderella was trying to find her place in the castle. I really liked the story where her stepsister was falling in love. It's a cute movie. Like, I'm not rushing to see it again, but it's not as bad as Letterboxd made it out to be. The last movie I watched in January was Psycho 2, which is a sequel to Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. This came out in the 80s, this came out after Alfred Hitchcock died, so he had nothing to do with this. And I was a little worried going into this movie. I reacted to this movie, and I'll link that up above. But I was a little worried because sequels, I usually have a very hard time with sequels that come out years later, and they're sequels for a movie that was clearly always supposed to be a standalone. And it's horror. Horror sequels usually suck ass. This held its own. It held its own really, really well. The guy who directed it actually did a decent job at kind of replicating the same vibe that Alfred Hitchcock was going for. But Psycho 2 is about Norman Bates leaving the mental asylum. He's trying to work out his own life at this restaurant he works at where he meets a girl. They go back to his house, to Bates Motel as well, and he's hearing voices again, he's confused, so all hell ensues. I think that's all I'm really going to say about it because, again, I did do a reaction. So I gave this movie 3 out of 5 stars. And like I said, it was pretty decent. It worked well. So now we're getting to February. In February, the first movie I watched was Over the Moon, which is a Netflix original movie. This came out, I think, 2020. So I think, yeah, because it's nominated for an Oscar this year. So it came out in 2020. It's about a girl whose mother died, and she builds like a ship so she can go up to the moon and meet the moon goddess. This story is based around Chinese culture. And it's a beautiful story. That made me cry, and the singing is perfection. I went into this movie not knowing it was a musical, which is very clown behavior on my part because it literally says musical when you go search for it on Netflix. And Philippa Sue is the moon goddess. Like, she sings, so I should have seen that coming. But this story is like, okay, so let's start from the beginning here. So this story, like, the story itself is something I have seen time and time again. Like, the plot of a grieving child trying to find solace with a god, goddess, whatever. Like, that's not new to me. So what was new to me was just seeing the Chinese culture implemented, because I believe, like, we hardly see that in media. And, like, yeah, it's a story that's, like, technically, like, kind of been done before, but, like, those people still deserve to tell those type of stories. What makes it different is the Chinese culture, and seeing the moon goddess, seeing, like, the festival they're celebrating in the beginning was a huge theme to it. This is like a comfort movie almost. It's so warm, and it's just it's so wholesome as well. And the songs are all bangers. They're all amazing, and it's a beautiful movie. Like, when she does get, like, she does get up to the moon. That's not really a spoiler because it's in the synopsis. When she gets up to the moon, like, the colors are beautiful. And then there's one scene, like, near the end that I can't really talk about because, again, spoiler territory, where it's depicting mental illness, it's depicting depression. The framing of it all was amazing, and it made me feel that depression, which was, like, kind of scary, but, like, the fact that it was scary means they did a good job with it. And this is just a beautiful story. And I really have nothing else to say other than that. So next I watched the movie that I did a reaction to. It was It Chapter 1. I read It by Stephen King last year, so I wanted to react to the new movies. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars out of 5. I don't want to get into too much detail because, again, I did react to it. In summary, I think for this movie, if I really wanted to enjoy it, I should have seen it before reading the book, because there was just so many differences from this movie compared to the book. I said this in my reaction. As a movie, this movie's great, but then as an adaptation, it's not bad, but it's very iffy, so I think that tainted my opinion a little. I will say this is scarier than the book. In the book, I wasn't really scared. I got spooked a little when they were describing, like, what happened to Georgie in the beginning, but then that's it. I didn't find the rest of the book scary, like, at times gross, especially during that one scene when they're leaving the tunnel. but not scary, whereas this movie did scare me. Granted, it was with a lot of jump scares, and as much as jump scares do their job when it comes to how I react to them, I do think they're kind of like a cheap way to scare people, but it still made it scary. There are still scenes that like made me tense, unlike the book, and yeah, it was just a decent film. So then I watched Joker, which is the origin story of one of DC's most famous villains, if not the most famous, Joker. I remember the controversy when this movie came out, because like, whenever people announce they're making villain origin stories, people get really pissed off because they think it's problematic to show those things. They automatically assume villain origin stories like condone the actions of a character, whereas I think the opposite. Quite frankly, I love villain origin stories. I always go into villain origin stories knowing what they're doing is explaining and not excusing, because I've always had a fascination about why people do the things they do, particularly villains, because like what makes people bad. Not to get like philosophical in this video, but I'm of the opinion like most evil people weren't born that way, and they became that way. So I'm always interested in seeing why, and thank you Avatar: The Last Airbender, because it all started with Azula, and that's where my interest came with villain origin stories. So I was actually really excited when this came out, because I don't think anything has ever been done like this for the Joker. And quite frankly, I do think this movie did a very good job at explaining the Joker's actions without excusing them. They made it very clear what he was doing was bad, and that he was evil, and he was going to continue to be evil and, you know, become one of the greatest villains of all of fiction. So how I view this, how I view the Joker by the end of the movie, not the end of the movie, but like somewhere along the line of the movie, he became like, he was kind of like a sympathetic antagonist, but then he crossed the line to just being like chaotic evil and just doing bad things because he wanted to, which those type of villains could be great to watch as long as they're well written, which I think he was. And I think the movie did a good job with discussing mental health and showing that this is what happens when some people who need help don't get the help. Because something I told my friend, like everyone wants to talk about mental health, right? But everyone wants to talk about mental health until mental health turns someone into a bad person, which I've noticed with Joker. Like a lot of people didn't want to have the mental health conversation with this because people are like, oh, you're stigmatizing mental health, or because you're stigmatizing mental illness, but I don't really think it did that, because like when you watch Joker, like what happened to him is something that could happen to people, and I do think that needs to be discussed, because then maybe you could find out ways to avoid like future altercations. There was one controversy I don't understand, and it's like that some people were pissed off about the end and how he was evil at the end of the movie. And my question is, like, they made this very clear, like all the trailers and stuff made it very clear this was a villain origin story. So what were those people expecting? Like, why were you expecting a happy ending where he turned out to be a good person? And the funniest thing about this movie is that, yes, Joker is supposed to be so evil, and yet I hated Robert De Niro's character more than I hated, like, Endgame Arthur/Joker. But like I said, chaotic villains who are just chaotically evil because they want to be, they can be enthralling to watch as long as they're well written. So then later I rewatched Honey, I Shrunk the Kids with the kids I babysit because I saw it on Disney+. I didn't know it was there. And when I saw it, I was like, let's rewatch that. So then we move on to another movie, which I had not seen before, which is Honey, I Blew Up the Kid. And in this movie, the oldest daughter goes off to college. The son is involved, but he's a teenager now. And now they have a baby brother. But the dad, the inventor, has this machine that made the baby like a giant. And I gave this movie like 2 out of 5 stars because like not even halfway through it I was bored out of my mind, and I spent the rest of the movie on my phone. So going back to sequels, this is an example of a sequel that just does not hold up. Then I discovered Fantastic Mr. Fox was on Disney+, and I had never seen this before, so I decided to watch it. This is based off Fantastic Mr. Fox by Roald Dahl. Wes Anderson obviously had to expand a lot because in the book it's literally just a fox running from animal to animal hole gathering food. This one has more of a plot because I wasn't a huge fan of the book, but I loved this movie. So in this adaptation, Mr. Fox is trying to make a life for his family, so he steals from these 3 farmers, and shit ensues is the best way I could summarize the rest of the movie without spoiling. I have to say the type of stop motion they were using was a little jarring for me to watch. It was just kind of weird, but I was able to put it aside after like the first 2 minutes. And I have got to say, the dry humor in this movie is impeccable. Like, the amount of times I laughed throughout this movie, and I was probably laughing at things that weren't even that funny in retrospect, but I thought were absolutely hilarious anyway. And I have to say, there's just something about Wes Anderson's way of symmetry in his framing of scenes that is so captivating. I don't know why. He's not the first person I watched do that, but I loved it anyway. Maybe it hits different when it's stop motion, but it looks so pretty. It was always so pretty to look at. Also, finding out George Clooney was in this like threw me for a loop. Why? I don't know, because I thought he did a good job. Some people beg to differ, but I thought his timing of the jokes were absolutely great. That's one of the things that made the dry humor as great as it was, is everyone's timing was just so good. And I could not picture anyone else playing these characters. Then I watched It Chapter 2. I also gave this one 3.5 stars out of 5 like I did the first movie. I reacted to this, so I really don't want to get into much detail. What I will say is that I like the ending to this movie better than I like the actual ending of the book. I made a vlog of myself reacting to the book as I was reading it. And let me tell you, when I got to the end where they were trying to defeat Pennywise like as adults, I was like, what the fuck is going on? What do you mean he's a spider? What do you mean he's female and there's eggs they need to kill? What the fuck is this turtle thing? What the fuck? Like, that book was a trip, and I don't mean that in a good way. So I was a little worried for how this movie was gonna do it, and I just thought they did a good job. Like, obviously they can't deviate that much from the book, but they fixed it up a lot, and it was great because Stephen King himself made a cameo, and he poked fun at, you know, his shitty endings and his horror books. You know, the ending gave me emotions. Another thing I liked better about the ending, and this is gonna be a spoiler, but in the book, after they defeat Pennywise, they forget the incident, and they have to forget each other for whatever fucking reason. And, like, I understand forgetting the incident itself because, you know, like, PTSD, but forgetting each other, like, forgetting your best friends, I still didn't understand the lesson behind that. And in the movie, they don't. They remember each other, and they're still friends. And it was just so much better than the book. Later I discovered Isle of Dogs was also on Disney Plus, and this is another Wes Anderson film that's stop motion, so I decided to watch this. This is about how some like rabid disease was traveling around with dogs in Japan. So Japan gathered all the dogs and put them on an island, and then a little boy travels to this island to try to get his dog back. But he meets like every dog but his dog. So then these 4 dogs work together to get him there. And I understand this plot is completely different from Fantastic Mr. Fox. I was gonna say Fantastic Beasts. And like, you can't really compare the two, but I'm kind of going to anyway, just because I think Fantastic Mr. Fox set up such a high standard when it comes to Wes Anderson's story writing and the stop motion used, that I used that standard for this movie. And then this movie ended up kind of being disappointing. What did I give it? I gave it 3.5 stars, which is not a bad rating at all. So it's not like I don't dislike the movie. I still liked it. I was just expecting more about it, especially because when I saw the trailers for this movie, it did look better than Fantastic Mr. Fox. Like, originally, when that movie first came out, I had no desire to see it, but then when Isle of Dogs was coming out, I was like, oh, I have to see it, and then for some reason never did. I did still like the symmetry and all the framing. I still love that. I love the dry humor. It wasn't as funny as Fantastic Mr. Fox, but it was still good. Some actors' delivery didn't work well, which I think was the problem. It was the delivery of the jokes I was having a problem with. But most of them did a good job. Like, Jeff Goldblum's in this. He's always so great at dry humor. The music, I loved the music. What I didn't like was the girl protesting all of this, just because it was jarring going back and forth between the dog story and then her story. And like, they came together at the end, obviously. It was just, I don't know if I disliked the writing of her story or if I just didn't like her story in general. I also have to admit there were a few times in this film where I was kind of like dozing off or just playing with my phone because I just wanted the plot to keep going. But I do appreciate how cute that ending was. It was adorable. The last movie I watched in February is called 5 centimeters per second, which is an anime movie. This movie is about a boy who fell in love with this girl when he was like 12, 13 years old. And we see the story's told in 3 parts, and it's all different parts of his life. The story's kind of about how she's moving on, but he won't. And first off, let me just say, every fucking scene, every fucking frame in this movie, I should say, is so beautiful. It's definitely one of those movies where every frame could be a wallpaper. I was mesmerized by the art. But I was not mesmerized by the plot, which is unfortunate. It's a very short movie, and it's free on YouTube if you want to look it up. But I thought the first story was really cute. And then we get into the second story, and that's when the movie began to drag for me, and I wanted it to be over. It was very boring. I mean, I'm glad the ending itself was satisfying, so it's not like I did this for nothing, but I wanted more. What do I mean by more? I don't know, which makes me a terrible critiquer because I don't know like how I would make it better, but no, I don't like this. I'm sorry. So the last 7 movies I'm going to talk about were all watched in March. The first one being Kubo and the Two Strings. This is a movie made by Laika, which is the same company that did Coraline and Paranorman. They're known for stop motion. So this is about a boy who could produce magic with his instrument. I forgot what it was called. But he makes origami form itself and perform stories. And just one day, he has to go on this quest to look for his missing samurai father. And it's just an adventure story from there. Okay, so the animation in this movie, stunning. There were some scenes in this where I can't believe it was stop motion. It was unbelievable, and I still question how they did it. I really liked the beginning. The beginning sucked me in, and I was excited for the rest of the movie. And I really like how the last 15 minutes were done. It's just everything in between was not for me. It was kind of boring and I wanted it to end, and at times I often found it predictable, and not necessarily in a good way, more so like you make this prediction, it happens, and you go like, oh yeah, of course, like that kind of predictable, which to me is never really a good thing if that's how you react to your prediction being right. But I would still recommend this movie. I still gave it 3 out of 5 stars because it wasn't like that bad, like the middle, like as much as I rolled my eyes at a few times. It wasn't that bad. And really what I want you to see this for, it's not even for the plot. I want you guys to see the animation itself because it was so cool. And also listening to Rooney Mara's voice because her voice was so soothing throughout this movie. So then I watched Rhea and the Last Dragon. Let me read you guys the Letterboxd summary just because this was a hard movie for me to create a synopsis for. Long ago, in the fantasy world of Kumandra, humans and dragons lived together in harmony. But when an evil force threatened the land, the dragons sacrificed themselves to save humanity. Now, 500 years later, the same evil has returned, and it's up to lone warrior Rhea to track down the legendary Last Dragon to restore the fractured land and its divided people. This story takes a lot of inspiration from Southeast Asian culture, and that was really cool to see. What did I end up giving this movie? I think I gave it about 4 out of 5 stars. What I find amazing about this movie is that it was all animated at home because they had to do it because of COVID. And there were a few scenes where the animation was a little iffy, but like for something that was made at home, animation was spot on otherwise. What did I think of the plot itself? I was captivated the whole time. Like I had a lot of fun with this movie. Sisu, I was a little worried for how I would like that character just because they gave a dragon the Disney princess face, so it was a little weird to look at. Plus, I have a very hard time with Awkwafina's acting style, but I really didn't mind it. Like, she does amazing voice work, and I thought she made Sisu a great character, so I ended up walking away really liking Sisu. And this movie was also just so pretty to look at. I love learning about the cultures of all the different lands. I do want to address something because I know like this movie, not the movie itself, but people have, a certain person, Lindsay Ellis, has recently come under fire for comparing it to Avatar: The Last Airbender, because if you don't know what that is, Avatar: The Last Airbender is a story that takes in inspiration from Asian and Inuit culture. Lindsay Ellis, you guys can argue about what she meant all day, but I did see people comparing the two simply because they were both Asian inspired. And a lot of people didn't like Lindsay Ellis's take because people just thought she was doing it just because they were both Asian, and a lot of people got pissed off about that because like, yeah, Rhea is Disney, but the screenwriters themselves were still Asian, whereas the creators of ATLA are white men. What was unfortunate about that situation is that a lot of people in the Asian community were bringing up valid critiques of what Lindsay Ellis said. It's just their voices got drowned out so fast in that debacle, and I did feel really bad. And they got drowned out from both sides, from the people who are trying to stick up for them, but also from the people who kind of just have there's a weird hate mob against Lindsay Ellis, and some people were just there waiting to bring her down. There's like a whole history behind it you guys can look up. It was so weird. But they were drowning out these valid critiques from the Asian community, which I thought was very unfortunate. I'm gonna be honest, when I watched the teaser for this, not the trailer itself, when I watched the teaser, I was kind of getting Avatar vibes. But then I watched the trailer itself, and I'm like, this is a totally different vibe. And the vibe of the movie matches the trailer. So I was like, this is not like Avatar at all. And then I watched the movie and I was like, this is nothing like Avatar: The Last Airbender. People need to stop comparing it. It's nothing like Legend of Korra. Let's stop comparing it. Because they are their own stories. They do have their different themes. They have their different morals. They have their different types of characters. Like, the characters are very distinct from one another. And I just feel bad because I've seen multiple people say, like, oh, well, it's like Avatar: The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra, and I've already seen those, so I don't have to see Rhea and the Last Dragon. And it's like, no, you really should, so you can actually make a valid criticism, or so you can actually make, like, a valid review of it. I don't know if that has anything to do with my, like, actual, like, review and what I think of Rhea and the Last Dragon, but I just think because that controversy has come about and, like, some people associate it with this movie, I thought I should bring it up and, like, what my thoughts were on that. So then I watched The Book of Life because I saw this was on Disney Plus as well, and I've been meaning to watch this for a while. This is produced by Guillermo del Toro. Let me read you the summary on Letterboxd again because I can't do it myself. The journey of Manolo, a young man who is torn between fulfilling the expectations of his family and following his heart. Before choosing which path to follow, he embarks on an incredible adventure that spans 3 fantastical worlds where he must face his greatest fears. That did nothing to describe what the movie was actually about. But it's Manolo versus his other friend who are in love with this girl, and it revolves around the Day of the Dead. So in the beginning, you see these kids going on a field trip, and they go to this museum, and a woman's telling the story, right? So that animation, or those character designs actually look different than the actual designs of Manolo and his 2 friends. She shows them, like, a box of, like, puppets or dolls, and then they're Manolo and co. So when we see Manolo's story, that's how they're animated. They're not animated as real people. They're animated as these dolls, which I thought was very clever. This is also a musical, which I did not know going into it, but it's a jukebox musical. So if you don't know what that is, a jukebox musical is when they don't have original songs. Every song in the movie are covers. So for example, he sings Creep by Radiohead.
But I'm a creep.
And he's just going through these worlds trying to win back the love of his life, and I just thought it was really cute. It was a good musical to jam out to. It always helps when you do know the music, I find. Oh, this movie's also very beautiful to look at. Like, all the colors and shit. Oh, loved it. Okay. Then I rewatched Twilight. I'm making up movie reactions for all these, and I'll link that playlist up above. I reread the Twilight series last year, and I did vlogs for all those books, so I wanted to do movie reactions. All I'm gonna say is, this movie is so much cringier than I remember it being. I remember loving this movie. I'm like, oh, this is a comfort movie. Alice and Jasper, my comfort couple. Still love Alice and Jasper, but damn. This movie, y'all, this was not... I mean, I loved it, like, nostalgically, but as a movie, this is terrible. This is actually terrible. Which does lead to the next movie, because I rewatched New Moon. That reaction is up. You guys can go check that out. New Moon was always my favorite, and I will say this was not as cringier as the first movie. Not only is the budget better, but the acting is a lot better. And so I'm a firm believer that people's acting skills also depend on the director. See, because I always knew Robert Pattinson was a good actor. Like, I've seen him in things outside of Twilight. So when I was rewatching Twilight, I was kind of shocked by how just not good he was. Like, even he was kind of bad. But then in New Moon, he was much better. And I always thought Kristen Stewart was a terrible actress. Like, I've seen her in stuff outside of Twilight. I've never liked her acting. But she's better at acting in New Moon than she is in Twilight. So, firm believer, directors really do make a difference. And I know, like, a lot of the fandom thinks the first movie is the best out of all of them. Like, it captures the vibe the best. Personally, I think New Moon captured the Twilight vibe the best. I know in my movie reaction I did a lot of complaining and I called out a lot of stuff, but, like, still forever my favorite. It's great. It's great to watch in the fall, like, with all the color schemes and stuff. That's when y'all should watch it, the fall. Then I rewatched Your Name. This is by the same guy who made 5 centimeters per second, so this is another Japanese anime movie. This is about a boy and a girl who switch bodies and, like, have to live each other's lives for a while, and then one day they try to meet up, and something is wrong. And that's all I could say, because if you guys watch this movie, I want you to go in with a blank slate. Because it's by the guy who made 5 centimeters per second, I don't know which movie came first, but because it's by him, this is another movie where every fucking frame is a wallpaper. Absolutely beautiful. I loved it so much, especially when you watch it in HD. It's so captivating. So the first time I watched this was actually in 2018. It was my senior year. I was gonna say high school. Oh my god. It was my senior year of college. and I was living with 3 other women in our apartment. We found out that one of my roommates had never seen The Breakfast Club, so we forced her to watch that, and in exchange, she made us watch this. So that's when I first watched it, and I remember loving it so much. And one of my friends was like, got so excited at the end of the movie that she threw her phone across the room, which, okay. But I forgot a lot about it, and I wanted to watch Weathering with You, and a lot of people were saying it's like an unofficial sequel. So that's why I sought this movie out. And it's just so good. Like, the plot twist of the movie caught me off guard. That's just, like, I have no words. It's just a beautiful movie. It made me feel warm inside. I love the ending. The ending filled me with happiness. And it's like, it's going to be like a go-to comfort movie from now on, I think. Which leads me to the last movie I watched in March, which is Weathering with You. And again, this is by the same guy who did 5 centimeters per second in Your Name. So therefore, every fucking frame in this movie is a wallpaper. Beautiful, outstanding, I love it. Again, I'm going to read the synopsis on Letterboxd because this one's a hard one for me to do myself. High school student Hodaka leaves his home on an isolated island and moves to Tokyo. But he immediately becomes broke. He lives his days in isolation, but finally finds a job as a writer for a shady occult magazine. After he starts his job, the weather has been rainy day after day. In the corner of the crowded and busy city, Hodaka meets a young woman named Hina. Due to certain circumstances, Hina and her younger brother live together but have a cheerful and sturdy life. Hina also has a certain power, the power to stop the rain and clear the sky. This was another one where I just kind of have no words because of how captivating it was, beautiful. I loved the friendship throughout the movie. I was kind of confused on why people were calling it an unofficial sequel of Your Name because, like, you could very much watch this movie without ever having seen Your Name. But then, like, at certain points in the movie, certain characters from Your Name show up, and I was like that Leonardo DiCaprio meme where he's kind of doing this, and I screamed a little bit. I'm just gonna repeat myself for Your Name. Like, the story was so cute. It was very beautiful to look at. It was very intense at times. There was one scene where I was, like, holding my breath because I was so scared about what was going to happen. But then the end was, like, a warm hug. It was very happy and left me not as much hope as Your Name just because of, the turn it takes and, like, what people living in Tokyo now have to go through. But, like, for the relationship of Hodaka and Hina itself, like, filled me with joy inside. I loved it. Put a big smile on my face. And this was just, it was cute, and it was just cool to learn that Your Name and this one are in the same universe. So I would actually recommend, if you do want to watch this movie, I would recommend watching Your Name first, just so you could see those characters and understand what's going on when they show up. Those Easter eggs are meant to tell you, like, hey, same universe. So it makes me wonder what this guy is going to do in the future. I don't know if he came out with anything else, and I should look into that. And that's it for this video. My throat is all dried out. Both my feet have fallen asleep, and it's nothing but pins and needles in my legs, and I'm dying. I was supposed to go to bed at 12:30. It is currently 1:01 in the morning, but I had to get this out, y'all. I was planning on doing quarterly wrap-ups, like I said, but I have already seen so many movies in April. I think April's going to get its own video. And then May and June will get their own video. So yeah, let me know down below what movies you guys have been watching so far this year. Let me know your favorite and your least favorite so far. And if you like this video, give it a big thumbs up, comment, subscribe. Y'all know the drill. And without further ado, I'm going to peace out and I'll see you guys later. Ciao a tutti.